the whole cycle of the Mahdis is that Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, now he takes some of these prophets and messengers and he chooses them and he tells them, okay, I'm going to teach you now. I'm going to enforce you now. I'm going to send you as a messenger, as a successor from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. I'm going to give you an opportunity to be one of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And I'm going to let you, okay, taste that which you gave us to. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد الأئمة والمهديين وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear sister and companion Tiffany.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear father.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me here.
God bless you. So recently we spoke in the Hall of Mysteries about the concept of daraja, and we've spoken about it a lot before. And we kind of displayed a lot of narrations which proved that the raja that we're living in right now, this return that we're living in which all the prophets and the messengers return, and the saints and the righteous alongside with the qa'im, that this event is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and it's actually a reenactment. It's a grand universal reenactment of a test that took place in the Adam world before we came into this physical world, the world of these souls, in which we were basically asked, all the souls were gathered and they were made to testify against their own selves. So they were presented, according to the narrations, with a voice, a light, the light of God, the voice of God. God spoke to the souls and he asked them, do you testify that I am your Lord? And all of the souls, they testified, right? Mm-hmm. And then he brought a particular group of the souls and he made them testify further. Do you bear witness that I am your Lord and that Muhammad is your messenger? And a large group accepted that, right? And then he brought forward a smaller group of those and he made them testify, do you believe that I am your Lord and Muhammad is the messenger and Ali ibn Abi Talib is the vicegerent of Muhammad? And 124,000 prophets and messengers, they accepted that. And hence they were chosen from the rest of creation and they were sent forward as prophets and messengers because they were firm on accepting the wilaya of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the imams from his loins, meaning the wilaya of the Ahlul Kisa, the wilaya of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Then there were only a select few that were further chosen from those 124,000 and tested yet even further with an additional testimony, right? And that is the acceptance of the wilaya of the Mahdi, so to speak. And in that, there were only 5 individuals that were able to kind of really testify and affirm that they believed in this, okay? Even one of them kind of stood by and he neither confirmed nor denied, and others, they just, And so Adam, he didn't have determination. He didn't confirm or deny. He didn't affirm or deny his belief in the Mahdi and the Mahdi's Sharia, his jurisprudence, and that the Mahdi would fulfill those things that he was sent with. And so he was not chosen to be a companion of, or one of those ulil azm prophets that were chosen like Noah and Abraham and Moses and Jesus and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yes.
And so that's the reason why Adam, in this lifetime, when he was sent in the physical, he broke the covenant with God and he disobeyed God, right? Because the inside of him in the old world, right, the apparent of him was belief, yes, but inside of him was a little bit of disbelief.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. And so that disbelief manifested in the physical world when he came here. Okay?
Okay.
So that's the purpose of the physical world. The purpose of the physical world is it's an additional test. It's an additional opportunity. And the narrations from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam made that clear, that creation back then when they were tested, they begged God for forgiveness, for mercy, and they made excuses. And they said, if only we were tested again, we would be successful. And so God gives them additional tests by coming down in this physical world. So that's one of the purposes why we come out here. It's a reenactment. It's another chance of that test. But it's also itmam al-hujjah. It's the completion of the establishment of the proof by God upon creation. And so that creation can never go back and say, oh, I wish that I had another chance. No, God gives them a bunch of chances in this physical world through their reincarnations. And without a shadow of a doubt, that which they held within their chests in the Adam world manifests in this physical world through their various mistakes and acts of disbelief. Yeah. Like the example of Adam.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense. We're basically like a reflection of like a higher reality, and everything that happens here is not like a coincidence. It's something that it reflects something that happened in a higher existence, basically.
Yeah, basically. It's something that was deep within our chests, deep within our souls.
Yeah.
We had doubts deep within ourselves. We had disbelief deep within ourselves. And when we come here for another test, because we haven't rid ourselves of those things, they manifest as we're tested again.
Yes.
Okay? So God's like, oh, look, you hesitated to jump in the fire when I commanded you back then. You hesitated to accept the da'wah of the Qa'im, or to affirm belief in the Mahdi. And here in this physical world, when you met him physically, or when the da'wah of the Mahdi was presented to you, you also faulted. You also basically, hesitated in terms of accepting it. And so the result of the test is the same, or in very rare cases, it is a possibility that an individual can change destiny. And through his journeys in this physical plane, he actually changes what had been inside of his own self, staining his own self. He manages to get rid of his doubts and do better in this physical world.
So it's a possibility to change things.
It is a possibility. It is. It's always a possibility. If it wasn't a true possibility, then God wouldn't be just, because then we wouldn't have any free will in this incarnation. This would basically just be something that we're forced to act out, but it's not in reality in our hands to change destiny. Okay? But that's not the case. It is in our hands to change destiny, although it's unlikely that we will if we don't cleanse ourselves from those doubts and disbelief that was in us previously, okay? And I also, in the lectures, I highlighted the fact that this return, or this raja, it's not just a reenactment, but I also displayed the reason why the people were doubting, the reason why the people were stumbling, the reason why there were so many mistakes that took place throughout history. And it all kind of stemmed out of this original sin. And the original sin was this envy that the people had against Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Everybody wished that they were the best, that they were number one. They saw themselves as better. They had in them a little bit of this same disease that Iblis had, right? And Iblis is also a creature, and he's a creation, and he reached to such a high stage with God. And the one thing that made him fall is the fact that he wanted to remain number one always. He wanted to be on top. He saw himself as the best. And we find in the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, all of these narrations that basically demonstrate that the prophets and the messengers, they struggled with the same thing that Iblis struggled with, right? Iblis struggled with this love of his own self, Moses did the exact same thing. And one of the narrations that we went over a long time ago, and that's very famous, it says that after Moses crossed the Red Sea with that great miracle and he received the Torah from God, that this feeling came into him. And he basically asked himself a question. He said, is there anybody that was created that was more knowledgeable than me? So he thought for a moment that he was the most knowledgeable of all creation, right? Which basically means that he thought that he was the best. It was the same thing that had happened to Iblis. And then the narration states that at that very moment, God revealed to Gabriel that Moses has been destroyed, and he tells him to go down, to Moses and to basically tell him to go, to the place of the unity or the coming together of the two seas, the junction of the two seas, where he's going to actually meet a messenger from God that is more knowledgeable than he is to teach him a lesson, right?
Yes.
And so that whole journey begun that way. And also in other narrations, God asks Moses to come meet him so that he can also teach him a lesson, that not to think that he's better than anybody else or not to love himself too much. And he tells him to bring somebody with him that he is better than. And so Moses, he feels it's a test, and he goes around and he's looking and he's trying to see. And then eventually he sees this diseased dog, and he thinks to himself, I must be at least better than this diseased dog. And he chains him up and he begins to take him with him. But halfway towards God, he becomes scared. And he thinks to himself, this is a bad idea. And so he lets the dog go. And when he reaches God, God tells him, Moses, if you would have brought that dog with you, I would have erased your name from the list of all of the prophets and the messengers. Okay. Yeah. So these things are evident. It's clear. It appears over and over again in hadiths pertaining to the different prophets and messengers, not just to Moses, that they all had these moments where they were loving themselves, thinking that they were the best. And the other narrations clarify that thinking that they're the best also meant that they were wishing for the ranks of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, right? So Moses, for example, after he's tested with the diseased dog, after he meets the righteous servant and his eyes are open to the fact that there are people that are better than him, God ends up revealing to him more and more about the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam, Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Al-Hassan, and Al-Hussein, and also about the Mahdi. And the narrations showed how Moses was wishing to be the prophet of Islam. He was wishing to be in the rank of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was wishing to be then after that in the rank of, or in the place of, the Mahdi of the nation of the Prophet Muhammad. He was wishing that his nation was better than the nation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was trying to, on the night journey, to basically get Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to bring down the level of accomplishment or the number of prayers that his nation can do, so that they may be equal to one another, his nation and Muhammad's nation. That when he heard, the narration state, when he heard that his nation was a special nation, meaning Muhammad's nation, he began to cry, he began to weep, he wasn't happy, he was sad because he wanted that for his people, for himself, because he thought that he was the best, right? Because he had envy against Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And we spoke about how it was, there were these narrations that state it's because of that envy that Abraham was thrown in the fire, that Jonah was swallowed by the whale, that Adam ate from the tree. And so these mistakes that came from the prophets and the messengers, the reason behind it is the envy, or is the hasad.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really heavy revelation, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, there must be a reason that these events occurred, and the whole description of what happened and how many prophets and messengers, they failed the test, right? Because of this mistake of having envy against Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. It really reminds me of that story in the Quran, right? Of Iblis and how he was unable to prostrate. He was unable to accept that Adam was chosen by God. It's pretty much the same the same thing. People are unable to accept the one who was chosen by God, and the reason why they were unable to accept it is the envy that's in their hearts.
Exactly. And so there were a couple points that I wanted to clarify. And that's why I kind of briefly went over that which we had previously, gone over in the Hall of Mysteries. But it was important for the people to understand and see that narration that had to do with Umar ibn Khattab and how he would be punished 1,000 times a day, and therefore it meant that his soul would be poured into 1,000 people every single day, right? Or else, how is it that he's going to be punished 1,000 times every day? Is it going to be the case that, now forget about whether it's literal or it's allegorical, if he's really going to be killed, or if it's an allegorical type of punishment, if it's an incarnation as a human, or if it's an incarnation as an animal, maskhin, so he's stepped on, or he's swatted, or he's killed. It doesn't matter. The point of it is that the narration makes it very clear that one man, right, on the bad side, Umar ibn Khattab, lives 1,000 lives per day. And so obviously the Mahdi is not going to just stand there all day long and resurrect him 1,000 times and then watch him as he goes to death 1,000 times, but rather his soul is placed into 1,000 different creatures, different beings, different individuals on a daily basis, right? So what this means is that there are individuals that are bad, that have to live a lot of lifetimes in this raja in order to pay for the sins that previously came from them.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah. Okay? Now that's really important because the opposite would be a logical conclusion too, and that is that there are prophets, messengers, righteous individuals, okay, that did a lot of good before in their previous lives, and that obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a large degree in the Adam world. And so they too, if they come into this world during the Raja, they would also be allotted a lot of lives or a lot of chances. And this is where we get the concept of the transmigration of the soul. And this is where we got this very difficult concept that we had had a lot of people struggle with previously to understand concerning the prophets and the messengers. If you have an individual, okay, who lives in this day and age, and he has upon him the soul of Moses. He is the reincarnation of Moses, for example. Yes. Okay. And let's say that at some point, this individual now, who's reincarnated Moses, apostates.
Yes.
Disbelieves. Okay. How would you explain that? Does that mean now that the soul of Moses goes to hellfire? That's the question that a lot of people had posed previously. And the answer is no, that the soul leaves that individual and he goes to another body because Moses had accomplished so much good that he gets all of these chances to eventually get it right, because that soul would never go to hellfire. He's already done so much good. Yes. And so he would succeed, but it doesn't mean that he will succeed in every body that he's in. Okay. Rather, he will stumble, and the stumblings and the apostasy and the disbelief that occurs from an individual that has the soul of Moses is not just from the individual himself, but it's an act of disbelief from the soul of Moses due to his disbelief in the Adam world before. Okay. So he's confronted with the Mahdi in that time, or with the dawah, or with something that's too difficult from him. And so this disbelief occurs from him, but he ends up getting a second chance. And the soul leaves him and goes to somebody else, and the individual himself is left without the righteous soul of Moses, and Moses continues on.
Okay. Well, that's a very fascinating explanation for this phenomenon that we're aware of. And As we know, there are certain souls who are in the category, right, of righteous souls, and they're not able to stay with a body that has fallen. And it makes sense why they would be given that chance, because they actually earned it in the Adam world. They did a lot of good. Their souls have earned, more chances, and so the soul itself is not really able to fail.
Yeah. So previously, the insinuation, or how most of the Ansar understood it, would be that the act of disbelief came from the individual carrying the soul, right, from the self or the nafs of that individual, but it didn't come from the soul of Moses himself. Yeah. So what's new here is that it actually came from both of them.
Wow. I mean, wow. It's actually very, that's a very heavy piece of information, because we're sort of used to thinking of the prophets and the messengers not in this way. Like, we're not used to examining that their souls could have any sort of sin or disbelief attached to them. But clearly, that's not the case.
I'll prove it to you. So basically, here's a question for you. Is this incarnation a test, or is it not a test?
It's a test.
Are there souls in this incarnation or not?
Yes.
So are they in a test when they come back here, or are they already, are they done? They're not in the test anymore?
They must still be in a test.
They are in a test. Anytime a soul comes to this physical world, they're in a test, they're in an imtihan, and that's why they forget what has previously occurred to them, and they don't know for sure where it is that they're going. Okay. Even if they have these souls, the souls also are veiled by the bodies, and the souls are in the tests as well.
Okay. Wow.
And if they're in a test, then obviously the actions that take place from the individual, they're accountable for, because they were the soul that was in the body in that time. Okay. So it's a reenactment. The stumbling that took place from Adam before in the Adam world, it manifests in his disobedience in eating from the tree, the disbelief, the stumbling, the envy that Jonah had before, it results in manifesting itself in him being swallowed by the whale. That's a major punishment, right? Yeah. That's a major act of disbelief that he had committed, and he was swallowed by the whale and made a sign for all people. Yes. The same thing occurred with all of the prophets and the messengers in their lifetimes. And so naturally, the same thing would emerge from them in this incarnation, in which they appear with the Mahdi or with the Qa'im himself in a time period where basically the Mahdi or the righteous servant is actually bringing to light very difficult jurisprudence, very difficult matters, very difficult rulings that nobody accepted in the Adam world except for the Ulil Azm prophets, and even then they struggled with it, as is clear or evident from the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam.
I mean, I think that it's very clear. My question would be, you mentioned that there's a chance of purifying yourself and overcoming the disbelief that you had in the Adam world. And I would just want to ask you, how do we escape repeating the same mistakes? Is it through that process of somehow understanding your soul and its mistakes, and then purifying and trying to combat against these things?
It's simply by being humble, by being obedient, by not envying. That's the most important thing. Yeah. The source of all sin is envy.
It's envy.
Yeah, people shouldn't wish for that which does not belong to them, and they should love the person that God appoints, and they should obey the person that God appoints without trying to think that they're better than him, and go over him. And if people just stuck to that, then none of the problems would have ever happened. Okay? Yeah. Why did Paul do what he did? Why did Abu Bakr and Umar do what they did? Why did the Samari do what he did? Why did Cain slay Abel? All of it was because of envy. Yeah. Okay. The other point that I wanted to clarify concerning all of this is the greatness and the magnificence of the Ahl Kisa alayhim salam, the Ahl Bayt. So here are these these beings, these high beings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created and chosen over all of the worlds, and they're envied by everybody, even by their Shia, right? Because the prophets and the messengers, they are the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, right? And that's why in the Quran it says, and verily from his Shia is Abraham, meaning Abraham is from the Shia of who? Of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, okay? Even though they're envied by their very own Shia, they don't resort to responding to this evil with more evil. They don't throw their Shia into hellfire. They don't kill their Shia. They don't condemn their Shia. For the most part, they have covered even over the mistakes of their Shia and made those mistakes barely even noticeable. It was Moses and the prophets that highlighted the mistakes of the prophets so badly in the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Quran, you can barely even notice their mistakes, right? How do they deal with it? They teach them, they complete them, and they grant them the opportunity for them themselves to be from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And that's what this whole wilayah of the Mahdi is. The whole cycle of the Mahdis is that Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, now he takes some of these prophets and messengers. He takes some of these prophets and messengers and he chooses them and he tells them, okay, I'm going to teach you now. I'm going to enforce you now. I'm going to send you as a messenger, as a successor from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. I'm going to give you an opportunity to be one of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And I'm going to let you, okay, taste that which you gave us to. You know, so you will be envied by the people in the same way that we were envied by the people. You will have to suffer and learn in the same way that we were suffering from you. You will be in our place. So he grants Moses, he grants Abraham, he grants Joseph, he grants Ismail, he grants the prophets and the messengers the opportunity to be from them, the Ahlul Bayt, that which they were envying, they get.
Wow.
You see?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what it's about. And by that, he completes mankind. They complete mankind and they wash away this disease of envy, because when the prophets and the messengers now as Mahdis get a taste of how horrible it is, they learn to never envy again.
That is incredibly merciful. I mean, the mercy is like overwhelming. Like just listening to the description of like how they suffered from the envy of the prophets and the messengers, you know, rather than you know, punishing them, they allow them the opportunity to experience that which they asked for and that which they wanted, and through that they learn the lesson. It's so merciful and so just, and it explains why this particular time in which we live is so like unique. All the prophets and the messengers have come back around the time in order to be tested and in order to learn.
Yes, and it doesn't just end with the 12 Mahdis, but rather it continues onwards until there are 12,000 successors from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhim salam that are chosen from the prophets and the messengers and given the opportunity to come back and to, you know, rule the earth and guide the earth and be from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam. God bless you, Tiffany, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Father. Wow, that was an incredible episode, and I really learned a lot of new information from this conversation. And it reminds me of a certain myth. And since we've been delving into myths a lot lately and finding out what we can learn from myths in our modern situation, I thought that it might be appropriate to look at the myth of the sword of Damocles. Now, this story is about a king named Dionysus and a man in his court named Damocles. And Damocles, he looked at Dionysus and he thought that he had it all. He was the king. He was powerful. He was respected by the people. He had parties around him. He had beautiful table spreads full of grapes and every finest fruit you can imagine. One day Damocles said to Dionysus that he would like to experience life as the king. And Dionysus stepped aside and he let Damocles sit on his throne and experience life as the king. And at first he had a good time. He was enjoying himself. He was eating and drinking and enjoying the respect of the people. But then when he got comfortable and he got full, his belly was full, he reclined. And he reclined in the throne and he looked up and he saw that suspended on top of the throne there was a sword, and it was suspended by a single hair. And this caused Damocles to panic, and he jumped up and he realized that he had made a big mistake and he didn't want this power and authority anymore. And I think it's clear that the sword represents the heaviness of the responsibility that the king bears. And this myth really reminds me of what we've learned today, and the fact that the Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them, they have a heavy responsibility with God. And people need to be careful what it is that they're wishing for, because when you envy them, you don't really know what it is that you're envying. And I think that it's very beautiful and merciful that God has allowed the prophets and the messengers to return in order to experience that which they wished for, in order to learn this important lesson. I hope that we can all glean important information from this myth and really take to heart what Abu Sadiq, from him his peace, has taught us today. God bless you all, and we'll see you again next time.